These are my toes. And for the next 5 weeks, they will serve as a metaphor for 5 truths you didn't know you need to know.
So I'm going to throw out through this series, each of the toes is a technical word, a philosophical word. And you will be challenged to use it. They say when you learn a new word, you need to use it like 100 times in the next couple of days so it becomes part of your vocabulary. Well, good luck using these words for the next 100 times in the next week. But it makes a point that in God's creation, in God's created order, and in the culture in which we live, there is a need for us to think critically and to engage with our culture and to understand that our faith is much more than just love Jesus and go to heaven when you die. But at the same time, don't let the technical word that we're going to use, that's part of the acronym, discourage you. Because I've also included a phrase that hopefully will be something that resonates more in each of our minds. So the T, the big toe, the T is teleology. But what the word means is understanding God's purpose based on the function for which he has created us. It's the question of purpose. Our faith is about understanding that there is purpose. All of this that exists has fingerprints of God all around it. There's evidence of intelligent design. And if there's intelligent design, if somebody has put all this together, they put it together for a reason. So what is that reason? As we think about teleology then and try to get our heads around the significance of design and purpose, we have the story of Esther. And Esther gives us a great line that summarizes this philosophical category called teleology. And it's the line we see, we're going to look at it in just a few minutes, where Mordecai says to Esther, "Perhaps you are here for such a time as this." There is meaning and purpose to God's created order. And yet, for reasons known only to God, he has chosen to not reveal all those things to us, but rather, in the absence of understanding all of the whys, to live a life of faith that concentrates on knowing the who behind the whys. But as we go through this story of Esther, remember this one detail: the name of God is never mentioned. There is zero reference to God, to worship of God, to the hand of God, to the sovereignty of God. This story happens purely on the horizontal level. Now, God is assumed, and there is a time where the Jews go into fasting, so there's an assumption about God. But this is a great story because it's not some spiritual giant who's going before the people having said, "See, I taught you this doctrine of teleology, now we're living it." No, this is human life in the rawest form with limited information. Now, it took place in the days of Xerxes, that Xerxes who ruled from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. And in those days, as King Xerxes sat on his royal throne, which was at the citadel of Susa, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave banquet for all his princes and attendants, the army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles, the princes, and the provinces being in his presence. So this is happening after Daniel, after Nebuchadnezzar. Babylon, the world power, has fallen to the Medes and the Persians, and Xerxes is now the world power. He is the greatest dictator of the world, especially in that part of the East. And this is a seemingly random event. Why? We have no idea why he decides to throw this celebration, to give a banquet. Why? We're not told. Just a random thing, probably driven by ego. Maybe he's trying to gain diplomatic influence or gain the loyalty of all of these people that were invited. But for whatever reason, he decides to throw this big banquet. It's a random event. The king throws a banquet. The queen, for whatever reason, refuses to go before the king. And so she's banished, and an edict is sent out to find a new queen. So here's Xerxes demonstrating his power and his authority. At a drop of a hat, He can have whatever he wants. Don't like the queen? She's out. Go want a new queen? Go find me one. It seems bizarre. These series of random events out of a guy who's somewhat crazy, evidently. Immediately after, given a few days, the king regrets his decision. And he decides it's time to have the Persian version of Persia's Got Talent, and invites all of these people to come, all these women to come, and he's going to choose a new queen. So here's an orphan that is the victim of the genocide against the Jews and the exile under Nebuchadnezzar. She's living there. Her parents are dead. Her cousin, Mordecai, is raising her. And now the inevitable happens. As the story is told, the comment is made, she's a beautiful woman. We know the king is looking for beautiful women. The tension rises. How is this Jewess going to serve this pagan king as queen? So now we have a second seemingly random event. So why did the king honor Haman? We have no idea. It just says the king decided to honor him. Random event. Who was this Haman? Don't know. Why honor him? Don't know. King decides to do that. And then Mordecai refuses to kneel down and honor him. Why? Well, maybe because it kind of felt like he was worshiping another god. Maybe there was some personal political tension between the two men. We don't know why. But Mordecai refuses to acknowledge him. The plot thickens. Not only is this guy going to refuse to bow down to Haman, he is a Jew. And the anti-Semitic feelings were strong. Just like the king was enraged that Vashti wouldn't honor him and kicked Vashti out, Haman is enraged that Mordecai won't bow down to him, and so the plot thickens. What are we going to do? In his anger, Haman launches a plot to destroy all the Jews everywhere, offers the king a bribe. I'll give you $10,000, basically, 10,000 pieces of silver. The king says, no, I don't want it. You keep your money, go ahead and do what you want. And so a second edict is issued. The first one was, go find me a queen. Second edict, we're going to kill all the Jews. Well, now we have another seemingly random event. We know that Esther doesn't know what's going on because Mordecai is going to send her a note and ask her to intervene. So all of these things are happening. This intrigue is happening where not everybody knows what's going on. We have the bird's eye view and the tension is mounting. What's going to happen to all the Jews? So the plot thickens. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther after Esther asked what was going on. Do not imagine that in the king's palace you can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and for your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained to royalty for such a time as this. This is teleology. This is divine purpose. This is God accomplishing his purposes through a very obscure set of seemingly random events, human events. We see nothing where it says that God set up this person or that person or did this or did that or this miracle happened or that miracle happened. God isn't even a part of this story. And yet, obviously, something is happening. So at this point, the plot becomes quite complicated. Motivated by anger, Haman plots to kill Mordecai and orders gallows be built so Mordecai can be hung on them publicly. Esther, out of concern for her people, begins a strategy to influence the king and change his mind. Mordecai, who's been hanging around at the palace, overhears a conversation where two officers of the court were going to assassinate the king. All of these seemingly disconnected, unrelated, random events are happening. But then Mordecai gets an opportunity to whisper to Esther about the plot of assassination, and the king's life is saved. So the third seemingly random event, the king has insomnia. Now here's another random event. Haman just happens to enter. So the king asks him, what should be done for somebody who needs to be honored? So Haman says, well, what you should do then is you should put the royal coat on this person who's to be honored, put a crown on him, put him on a royal horse, and have somebody lead him around the city saying, the king is honoring this person. This person is a great person. And the king says, that's a great idea. Haman, I want you to make that happen. Sure, no problem. Who? And Haman expects him to say, you. But the king says, Mordecai, Haman's archenemy. So Haman's ego, and ego in general, theme of the story, begins to work against him. And instead of taking Mordecai out to kill him, he now has to walk him around. The irony, the stressors in this story as one part plays against another. Coronation Street could not come up with a better plot than what's happening in the book of Esther. And you wonder, in all of this, what's going to happen to Mordecai? What's going to happen to Esther? What's going to happen to the Jews? Well, Haman's humiliated. Do you see the irony here? Here's the guy plotting to kill all the Jews. Now he's humiliated before Mordecai. And now the Jewess, a woman, that misogynistic culture, she's kind of down here, has authority to grant or to take his life. That phrase resonates with us for such a time as this. Haman is taken out and he's hung on the very gallows that he built for Mordecai. The king, he can't really reverse the order according to the law. He can't withdraw it, but he does give permission for the Jews to be informed and to give them arms so they can defend themselves. And ultimately, all of the wrong that was being exercised against the Jews, their vulnerability is turned around and they survive. And it's an amazing story of the providence and the purposes of God being accomplished without the name of God or a religious ritual other than fasting or any other engagement with Almighty God being documented in the story. And yet the story just oozes the fingerprints of God throughout the human experience. Of people who are angry, who get drunk, in political intrigue, who can't get along with one another. Of Haman and Mordecai, these constant enemies trying to outfox each other. And in all of that is this vulnerable woman, an orphan, been raised to the seat of being queen. And God places her there for such a time as this. Because God has purpose. And the lesson, I think, is that there's no other agenda driving history other than God's divine purposes. And that's still true today. Nothing is driving the agenda of history other than God's divine purpose. We are confused, we are hurt, we suffer because of the brokenness of creation and sin, but it is accomplishing divine purpose.